going on, everybody? Right Hand Drive Ron with you here today. To my subscribers, welcome back. To the new folks, thanks for being here with me today. So today, we're not talking about practice. We're not talking about a game where I give 110%. We're talking about wheel sizes and wheel offsets for our Honda Acty trucks. One of the more frequent questions I get on the YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook alike is, hey Ron, what size wheels do you know fit my truck? So today we're going to size up a couple of those wheels and kind of show you guys what to think about whenever you're looking at offset, size, and overall diameter of your wheels. So robbed a few sets of wheels off the cars and trucks around the garage here, but we've got some 13-inch Honda VX wheels we're going to try out, some 14-inch Volk CE28 ends, some 14-inch Volk TE37s, and we've also got the fan favorite GSR Fat 5s off of my very first car. So, all right. So you're going to get a Ron 101 on wheel sizes and offsets. I got the whiteboard ready. Stay tuned. Let's get to it. All right. So what I've got is a very rudimentary drawing here of what's going on there with your front suspension here. So here's the spindle of your truck. This location right here is where your wheel actually bolts up to your spindle. The black here is the indication of your tire. And we're basically looking at a tire and wheel as if it was just cut in half, right? And what I've shown here is a wheel that's basically perfectly square, meaning if your width up here was, say, 5 inches, then the center line of your wheel would mean that you have 2.5 inches and 2.5 inches on either side of where the actual spokes of your wheel bolt to your spindle, okay? That right there would be an offset equal to 0. 0 offset wheel, 5 inches wide, 2.5 inches on either side. That's pretty square. All right, so now if we took that same wheel and we said, all right, we're still going to go with a 5-inch wheel. However, we're going to say it is a plus 45 millimeter. Now you might think, okay, plus 45 millimeter is going to push the wheel out. It's actually the complete opposite. So a plus 45 would mean that where your center line used to be square at 0, now you've shifted over 45 millimeters. So the new center line of your wheel is more like this. So now your spokes are the red line, meaning that when you bolt it to your spindle, you're now moving your wheel and tire closer to the truck. You're moving in whenever you go plus 45 millimeter, okay? Because you're now bolting up at this location, which is the distance between the old center line and the new center line. So plus 45, you're going that way towards the truck. All right, so let's talk about what happens on the opposite. Okay, let's say, all right, now we've decided to go with a negative offset. So we've got negative 45 millimeters our offset. What that does is the exact opposite. So now the negative offset actually moves the center line of where your wheel bolts to your spindle further towards the truck. So you're now going in 45 millimeters. And what that does is you can see it now pushes your wheel out because you're now bolting up here. Your wheel moves out. So the negative offset is going to take your tire and wheel combination and move it out further from the vehicle. A couple things to keep in mind here is whatever offset you use depends on what your width is. So if you've got a 5-inch wheel with a plus 45 millimeter offset, it's not going to fit the same as a 6-inch wide wheel with a plus 45 millimeter offset. Difference being is your starting width is already 1 inch wider. So going 45 millimeters in or going 45 millimeters out will make difference as to what rubs because your overall width is now larger, right? So if you were at 6 inches wheel width and you had a 0 offset, you would be at 3 and 3 on either side. So you're already wider. Now you may have issues with rubbing because you've essentially got a 1/2 inch more wheel and tire before you even do an offset. Another thing to keep in mind with the Acty trucks is your overall diameter, and this is your overall tire diameter. I can't completely vouch 100% for it, but from everything that I've read and looking at tire sizes, your overall diameter to not require lifting your truck should be less than 23 inches. okay? So if you want to keep it safe, find you a 22.5-inch tire, overall diameter, and that will help you with rubbing underneath the actual wheel wells there. It'll also help you when you turn the truck as to if you're going to get any tire rub on the inside of the truck as well. So we're going to leave this here. We're going to go swap out a couple tires and wheels and just kind of show you guys how this varies with the truck. All right, so up now we've got the fan favorite Volk TE37s. Remember, these are 14x5 with a plus 45 millimeter offset. So these sit relatively flush with the body of the truck, you can see. So if you're looking for something that pretty much squares the truck up, that 14x5 with the plus 45 millimeter offset really sets it about square with the body lines there. All right, so we're going to take the wheels left to right here for the Volk TE37s and just show you guys what it looks like whenever you're not rubbing. Keep in mind this truck is factory height. There is no lift, there's no lowering, and it is sitting here on a lift, right? So you've got somewhat of a unsprung of your suspension here, so it is dragging a little bit. If there's weight on the front wheel there, whenever you're sitting in the truck, you could have some rubbing issues. I can tell you from driving this truck, I do not have rubbing issues. I just want to show everybody what it looks like whenever we're in and out here, making sure we're not rubbing here with our wheels. So there's full lock left. So your gap here. Full lock right. And you're actually getting a little bit close on the back side of the tire here to some of your splash guard underneath the chassis of the truck. So there again, not a big deal if you're rubbing that plastic, and that plastic is removable, but if you want to keep your plastics in good shape, you know, that's something to consider. Something else to take a look at when you're choosing your offset and your wheel is your tire, right? Looking right here at my coil spring, I have just enough to put a finger in there. So we're talking about maybe 3/4 of an inch between the tire and the coil spring. So something else to factor in whenever you're thinking about your overall width of your tire. All right, so I'm at the back of the truck now. Just a reminder, these are TE37s, 14x5 plus 45 millimeter offset. The tire width on these are 155s, and that's a 65 series side profile. So the main thing you want to consider here when you're looking at offsetting your tire width is basically the distance between your leaf spring and your tire. Taking a look at what I've got here, we're sitting right at about 1 inch between the leaf springs. So if your offset is more, so if you're going 50, 55, 60 millimeter offset, you're actually going to come further back this way and get closer to this. So the smaller your offset goes, the closer the center of your wheel is to your actual hub, we'll push it out this way. So if you're going with a plus 35, a plus 20, your tire is going to go away from that leaf spring. Just to show everybody what the TE37s look like with the truck lifted, that's it. So still pretty square with the body line, not a lot of underhang or overbite, as I like to call it, of the body, bread trucking if you will. Not a lot of hella flush either, so this is kind of the OG me, what I like. And that's why I've got TE37s on here with this offset. All right, so we know that the Volk TE37s, 14-inch with the 155/65 tires fit. So let's just take a look at the overall tire diameter there. And I'm being generous with this measurement. This tire combo is slightly under 22 inches. So we know it fits. Let's put it on the board. And they fit. All right, so next up, we've got some Volk CE28Ns. These are 14x5.5, and the offset on these are plus 35. These actually came off the Honda Beat, and they've got a 165/60 series tire on them. Let's see how they fit. So I've got the Volk CE28 ends on. There's no issues with clearance, no contact with the brake caliper, which is a good thing. I still have the TE37s on the back just because that is the wheels for this truck. And it's also a good comparison point. So taking a look at the front, you can see that we've actually got a little bit more poke from the Volks there. Remember, 5.5-inch wheel plus 35 millimeters. The difference in the Volks TE37s obviously is that they're a 5-inch wheel with plus 45 millimeters. So the 1/2-inch difference isn't exactly made up between the 35 and 45 positive offset between the two wheels. So that's why we're getting a little bit of poke from these right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at how these stack up in regards to turning radius. All right, 14-inch Volk CE28 ends, making that turn to the left. Plenty of room. Probably our closest contact point is this structural tie bar here on the bottom. And we are clearing. So good there. I'll take this back. See what we look like on the back side here. Very similar to the T37s. We are getting a little bit of rub here in the splash guard, inner fender plastic here. No big deal. And unlike the T37s, it looks like we've got more room here between the spring and the tire. So that smaller positive offset allowed us to move a little bit further away from the truck. That's why we've got the pooch on the outside, skateboarding if you will. That's what I call it anyway. But overall, these wheels fit good. Let's see what they look like sat down. All right, so here's the truck holding itself up. We've got it loaded up with the body weight, and you can still see we've got a little bit of pooch from this tire. I don't hate it. It actually looks a little mean and aggressive, so that's something to consider. There again, that's a 14x5.5 with a plus 35 millimeter offset. All right, now that we know that the Volk CE28N fits, let's take a look at that overall tire diameter. This one's very similar to the T37s. Overall diameter, I would say, is just shy of 22 inches. So let's put it on the board and say that it fits. To keep in mind, as you saw, we did not install this tire on the back. As I showed you with the TE37, that offset was good in regards to clearing the leaf spring. So we know that since this one actually moved the tire further away from the vehicle, that we would have a little bit more room clearing that leaf spring as well. So we just stuck this one on the front. We know it's good for the back. Back's not turning unless you're doing something real crazy like putting a K-swap in one. That's a story for another episode. Anyway, yeah, we're all good. All right, next up is the heavy metal. This is a lot heavier than the Volk wheels, but you've got the fan favorite, the GSR Fat 5, 94 to 95 Acura Integra. This was the wheel. If you were a street racer, it was cheap and you could put slicks on it. Not that that ever happened. Nonetheless, this wheel here is a 15x6. It is a plus 45 millimeter offset, and we'll check the overall tire diameter after. So I think this wheel and tire combination is actually scaring the Acty truck. I don't know that it has enough horsepower to turn these, but we're going to try to put them on here and see what fitment issues we may have. All right, folks, so as expected, this tire is having some fitment issues. I've got 2 lug nuts on it, just hand tight, just to hold the wheel and tire up here, but basically the wheel itself and the tire are currently contacting the coil for the suspension there. So this wheel will not work unless you're running a spacer. Let me dig in here and see if I can estimate that a little better. So as you can see up here in this region, we're actually contacting the coil with our tire. This is our 15x6 GSR Fat 5 with the plus 45 millimeter offset. This just goes to show what I was teaching earlier in the offset 101 session, is that although you have a plus 45 millimeter offset, your wheel width determines how close you're going to be inside the truck and outside the truck, right? So because this wheel is a 6-inch and our first ones that fit were a 5-inch, we've got an extra ½ inch either way before adding offset. So when you take the same offset, it pulls the tire and wheel closer to the truck, and now we've got contact issues right there, right? So I'm gonna see if I can try to back these lugs off and see if I could estimate, you know, approximately how much of a spacer we would need for those that want to try to run a 15x6 plus 45, just to try to get you in the ballpark. All right, so trying to take a look at what spacer you would need for that 15x6 plus 45 millimeter. A big one is what I would say. So I've got the lug nuts backed almost all the way off to where the wheel's falling off. And if you take a look in here, what I've tried to do is simulate where a spacer would go. So here's your brake rotor and here's the back side of your wheel. You can see I can easily fit a finger in there. I would say you need safely at least a 1-inch wheel spacer to run these. And another thing to keep in mind is when you run that thick of a wheel spacer, anything over 5 millimeter from a factory wheel stud, you typically need to go with extended lugs. So if you can get an adapter that has you know, extended lugs on it, I would recommend that. Otherwise, if you go with a 1-inch spacer, you're going to need to get like some ARP extended wheel studs so that you've got enough thread engagement to put your lugs back on. So this one's out. We'll take a look at the tire diameter for he's and haws, but moving on to the next one. All right, so we know this doesn't fit. We're going to take a look at the overall tire diameter anyway, just for he's and haws. Now, this is a 205/50/15. One thing to note, if you did go with a smaller width, if you went with, say, maybe a 195 or maybe even a 185, you may not have to go with such thickness of a spacer. Still, just being conservative, you know, with wheel travel and turning and everything, if you do go with a 15x6, I would definitely recommend something more narrow, maybe even a 185. So looking at the diameter of this one here is approximately 23 inches. So from a stock height standpoint, you would think this would work if you weren't having the issues with the actual fitment and offset, you know, contacting your coil spring there. So something to consider with your 15-inch wheel, your profile of 50 is going to set you at about 23 inches overall diameter. And that's going to vary a little bit between different manufacturers. Some may be, you know, 22 3/4, some may be 23.1. Just consider that whenever you're looking at running a wheel combination that big. So let's put it on the board. All right, so I continued scouring the garage, and I remember I had a stock set of 13-inch Steelies from my 92 Civic DX laying around with tires that are probably older than some that are watching this video. Nonetheless, we got some 13-inch Steelies. These are 13x5s. And I do not see the offset to tell you guys, but let's try them on and see how they fit. All right, so first impressions of the 92 Civic DX 13x5s. They roll, they clear the calipers, and this is the size tire we got here. This is a 185/70, so it's a pretty meaty tire. You can see it's actually got a little poke coming out there from the side of the door there, body of the truck, you will. Remember, we've still got our TE37s on the back, sitting flush with basically the bed of the truck. So, you know, we've got maybe, call it 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch of poke on the 13x5 Steelies. A very good, cheap, affordable option. And let's do a steering test and see if these contact. So I don't know if you guys can see, but we are probably 1/8 of an inch to maybe 1/4 of an inch from contacting our coil. Right here, we are clearing, but with any flex in the tire, you're likely to rub with this series tire. Now, looking at the actual rim itself, the rim is going to be stationary, right? So it's never going to flex or get closer to your actual coil spring there. So I'm thinking if you used the 13x5 Stilly, but you went with like a 165 or maybe even a 155 tire, I think you'd be in much better shape. And that's something you ought to be able to use without worrying about contacting your strut and your coil there. So let's go back and forth with this one, see how we rub, if we rub. So there's lock left. There again, we're getting a slight bit of rub right here on this tie rod. So I think that could be remedied with a 165 or a 155 tire. There again, this is a 185 and a 70 profile. So if you go with a smaller profile and a more narrow width, you're going to get more clearance all around. Taking it back to lock right. Definitely contacting the plastic splash guard. There again, if you didn't have the splash guard, you'd be in okay shape. But overall, yeah, this isn't a bad option. Kind of gives it a classic look too. So if you got a set of 13x5 Stillies, you may want to consider those with some more narrow tires. All right, so we know the 13x5 steel wheel fits. The 185 width tire is a bit too much. I would recommend a 155 or a 165 and maybe even a 50 to 60 side profile. There again, this is a 185/70, and we were having a little bit of rubbing issues with the inside of the tire to the coil on the actual strut there. Taking a look at overall diameter, I would call this one probably 22 3/4 of an inch diameter there. So that would fit the bill for keeping your truck stock height. There again, I think if you go with a smaller side profile tire like a 55 or a 60, it's going to actually reduce that overall diameter as well. So we'll put this on the list with the caveat that you're going to need some different tire combination, but the steel wheel itself fits. All right, so last up, and I don't have the tires yet, but I'm going to order some Toyo Proxy R888s, probably some 185/60s is what I plan on putting on this wheel. This here is freshly powder coated and painted center caps, champ white for the Acty that's getting a K24. Check out my other videos for that, it's coming. Basically, these right here are 13x5s as well, just like the steel wheel. This is a plus 45mm offset. I do anticipate these should fit with no issues as long as we're clearing the actual brake caliper, which I imagine is fine considering we had a 12-inch factory wheel on the truck prior to. So we're gonna size these up, just see how they fit, just to show that they do, and go from there. All right, so as expected, these fit just like the steel wheels. If I was a betting man, I would say the offset on those steel wheels is probably also 45mm, but not stamped on the steel wheel, so not 100%. Probably a little Google research would square me away on that. Nonetheless, 13x5s plus 45mm. There again, these are off of a 92 Honda Civic VX. And these are ultralight, cool looking wheel. It's almost got the 96 to 97 JDM Type R look with the 4x114. This is 4x100, so gives you that same look. I can say that we are really close to the edge of the wheel here in regards to touching the coil spring. Now, that will not interfere because all this is rigid together. However, just like the steel wheel, we want to be careful with what tire selection we make. So the 185 might be too wide without having to run a spacer. And based off what tires are available and what I want to do for the Acty, because it's going to be a big horsepower Acty, is I'll probably have to run some spacers with some extended wheel studs up front, just because I do want to be able to put those 185 R888s up front here and on the back for total tire annihilation. So, yep. So there again, there's our wheel. It does fit. Careful with your tire selection. If you want to run these without a spacer, I would recommend probably a 155 and maybe a 55 sidewall profile tire there. So good to go. Let's get these off and get the TE37s back on. All right, everybody, so to this point, I've showed you some various size wheels that fit and don't fit the Acty truck. Just to show you where the little truck started, this is a 12 by 3.5 steel wheel here. The offset on that is plus 40 millimeter. So taking a look at our board, we know it fits the 14x5 with the plus 45 millimeter. Seems to be a very common fit. If you search Yahoo auctions or other Japanese websites, that seems to be the staple size and offset for the Acty truck. So when you're sizing up your new 13s, 14s, or 15-inch wheels, take into consideration what I gave you here in Ron's Offset 101 course when you're deviating from your factory wheel size and specs. So as always, if you like what Ron's doing, please subscribe. Also, check me out on Instagram. That's RHD_Ron. Until next time, folks, take care.